This episode of the Europuck podcast is brought to you by DraftKings. Basketball is entering the final month of the regular season and the race for the playoffs is on. While some teams are already locked into the postseason, others are still fighting for their opportunity to chase the trophy this summer. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is putting you in the centre of the action with a chance to turn $1 into $100 in free bets. Turning $1 into $100 is really simple, folks. Just put a single dollar on any basketball team to win their next game, and if during that game, the team of your choosing hits a three-pointer, you take home $100 in free bets. That's 100 to 1 odds on the team of your choosing to hit a three. They don't even have to win. This year's teams have been hitting threes at an unprecedented rate, so get in on the action before this offer ends, and you can do so with DraftKings' safe, secure, and reliable service, which lets you deposit and withdraw your funds at your convenience. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code THPN during sign-up to turn $1 into $100 of free bets if any basketball team of your choosing hits a three-pointer. That's code THPN to turn $1 into $100 in free bets for a limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook. A big thank you to DraftKings for sponsoring this episode. Hello, bonjour, hello, hi, heya, and privyet, hockey fans. Welcome back to the Europuck podcast, the show where two Brits talk all things European hockey as part of the Hockey Podcast Network and brought to you by DraftKings. My name is Hayden, or Oddman Rush, as you can see up there on the video version, and joining me once again is my regular co-host, the person that has had to deal with me all season long, and all of my flubs when we record the ad reads first thing in the episode. It's my good friend Chris Gadsby. Hey, Chris.
I was going to say more than all season, isn't it? I've been like 4 years or something now. I had to put up with you.
Yeah, fair. How do you do it, Chris? How do you do it?
Well, short bursts. That's the key to it.
Short control
Only do
bursts.
it for about an hour and a half at a time, and then it's fine for another few
It's like,
days.
right, I'll see you next week. Bye. So, how you doing, Chris? How's your week been? You had a good time?
It's been a busy week. Very busy week. So last time we spoke, I said I'd ordered a skip.
You did.
The skip is now here on my drive.
Yes.
So I spent the last, in lunch breaks and after work, lifting lumps of concrete from one side of the back garden. I had no idea how much concrete we had in our back garden, but we've nearly filled the skip just of concrete, which is not a good start.
Wow, okay.
And then on Friday, I bought and ordered my new, faster, better internet.
Yes! Finally!
So I finally got close enough to the end of my contract that I got the email from my supplier to say, ring us and chat about your options and you can end this contract without any early termination charges. So I rung them up and I said, well, I've done some shopping around and I want to upgrade to fibre because the whole reason we were not on fibre is because we were told we couldn't get it, but then it turned out we could and all this stuff.
Yep.
And I said, I've done some shopping around. This company is the best. It's this price. And my provider went, no, we'll do it cheaper than that. And the speeds are better. And I was like, all right, cool.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's still not brilliant because we're in the village in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
But
we'll
have gone from minimum speed of 0.2
right
to minimum speed of 11.5. So we're going 57 times faster.
Yeah, for those of you who don't understand technology or Wi-Fi, it basically means it's gone from a potato to a beautiful roasted chip, a delicious chip that everyone wants to enjoy.
I think it's gone from kind of like a raw potato to mashed potato, but it's not like super fast fibre, lovely roast potato.
Right. Although I probably prefer mashed potato to roast potatoes. There's just something about mash that hits differently.
To go from an average of 2 to a peak time average of 20 is just going to be so different. So looking forward to it, and hopefully it'll allow us to do more stuff with this.
Absolutely. The fact that we're going to have some, because obviously I've had my fair share of issues with technology and with this podcast series.
They've mostly been mine.
I feel like it's been quite balanced over the last few months, there's been times where my computer's I don't actually want to work today, Hayden, and it's I needed to record a podcast today, so thanks for that. But yeah, Today, we're kind of doing what we usually do, talking you through a lot of the results, scores and standings. It's interesting. Chris reminded me, it's Wednesday today, Wednesday the 14th of April, I might add. We've had some news here in the UK. Things are starting to open up a little bit more, so we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, which is nice. Hopefully it continues that way. And obviously we've got the nice weather here, which is great. But when the sun comes out and when the weather gets all nice and hot, you know that the hockey season's almost over. And we're very much in that situation for a lot of the leagues around Europe, except for the DEL, which is getting close. It's almost there. But Chris said we should record this episode this week on Wednesday because apart from the DEL and then the little Elite League tournament, every single other league around Europe has finished their regular season and they're now looking towards the playoffs. So we've got the postseason to talk about. So I think, Chris, we should just get on with it, really, shall we? Should we just get into the KHL?
I think so, yes. Yeah. I think so. And I'm going to kick off the KHL by saying, damn you, Akbars Kazan. Akbars Kazan, they had their game 6 yesterday, 0-0 at the end of 2 periods.
Wow.
And I set it down. I watched the final period on TV here in the UK.
Shout out to Free Sports.
Shout out to Free Sports. I wanted Avangard Omsk to win for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 was that it would mean the series was finished by the time we recorded today, so we'd have our 2 finalists in the KHL.
Indeed.
And reason number 2 is that Omsk are the 2nd seed, not the 1st seed. And I always want the underdog to do well in the playoffs. But it was a lovely opening goal for Akbars Kazan at 5:48 in the 3rd period, and then there was an empty net goal at the end. Both goals coming from Akbars Kazan for Kirill Petrov. He has now 9 points in 14 games in the playoffs, so they are going to a game 7, which is tomorrow. As we're recording this, it's Wednesday now. So tomorrow on Thursday is game 7. So by the time this comes out on Friday morning, we will have our 2 finalists in the KHL, which is another reason why good internet might help us in the future if we can change the way we do this.
Yes, indeed. Just to sum up how the KHL standings look at the moment, obviously we're very deep or towards the conclusion of the conference finals. Akbars Kazan, as Chris mentioned, won the game yesterday or 2 days ago. And it was yesterday. So they're going to a game 7, Kazan and Omsk. And then in the Western Conference, CSKA Moscow won the series in 6 games against SK St. Petersburg. Now, a couple of interesting tidbits to know about the conference finals. The Moscow St. Petersburg series, Moscow went up 3-0 in that series. They shut St. Petersburg out in the first 2 games, like we mentioned last episode. Moscow were playing really well. They were the better team in this series. As a St. Petersburg fan myself, I'm used to watching them get beaten by Moscow in the conference final, so it's fine. I'm used to it. But at the same time, you've got to give credit to St. Petersburg for fighting back and getting a game 6 in there. Go for it.
I was going to say, it's game 5. Obviously, you will have covered this. It's game 5 that I love. They needed 53 minutes of overtime.
Yeah. They
needed 2.5 extra periods of overtime to break the deadlock there. And, SK, they could have, they did win it in the end, but they could have won it earlier because they had a goal disallowed thanks to a coach's challenge 3 minutes from the end.
Yeah.
But that just struck me as one of those games where the game 6, which CSKA Moscow, won by 2-0, you feel that after playing almost 2 games of hockey in one night just a couple of days before, that 6th game was basically who has the legs, who is better and just who's got the legs at the end of it, because everybody must have been absolutely knackered.
But it does also go to show how desperate SKA were to stay in that series, that they wouldn't give Moscow that final goal. And it took to triple overtime to finally get that goal scored. I think it was by the Canucks prospect, Podkolzin, I think it was. He had quite a good series against Moscow, as far as I'm aware. He was quite quiet towards the regular season, quite quiet early on in the playoffs, but he really turned it up in that conference final series. So Canucks fans might be happy to hear about that.
You look at the stats from just the overtime period, and because it was basically another game, SK St. Petersburg had 21 shots just in overtime.
Wow.
I mean, they only had 40 shots in the whole game. They had more shots in the 53 minutes of overtime than they did in the 60 minutes of the regular game.
Wow, fair enough then. Jeez. So yeah, unfortunately, as a St. Petersburg fan myself, it sucks that we once again lose to Moscow. Yeah, it sucks. I was kind of expecting it, especially when they went 2-0 down. I was like, oh, we're going through this again, are we, St. Petersburg? Good. To be fair, like the St. Petersburg roster that they had this year, when you look at the players that they've had in their organization over the last 3 or 4 years and see where they've all gone in that time, a lot of them have either moved on to the NHL and are still there, or they've gone to the NHL and come back to play for a different team. Like the actual overall, this was one of their rosters that, in terms of the other rosters that I've seen of theirs over the years, this is one of the weaker rosters that I thought they had on paper. So part of me was like, the fact that they made it this far, I was quite impressed with, especially like, Chris, you've mentioned pretty much every single episode, they were technically the 4th seed in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
They were only the 2nd seed because of the way that they do the divisions. So the fact that you could basically say the 4th seed made it all the way 2 games away from the Gagarin Cup finals is pretty impressive in and of itself. So it sucks to not see St. Petersburg competing for a Gagarin Cup. I feel like ever since I've started supporting all of these teams, I'm a bit of a bad luck charm. We ain't won a championship yet, but we'll get there eventually. And then, like you mentioned, the Kazan Avangard series going to Game 7, which will be played by the time this goes out. But I mentioned to Chris before this, which I found quite interesting. 2 things to add, actually. First of all, the Kazan Omsk series is the first time in KHL history, so their last 12, 13 years of existence, that every single game in the series, or the first 6 games in the series, have all been won by the away team. Home ice advantage has been non-existent in this series between Kazan and Omsk. So if you're wearing the home jersey, don't expect to win the game. I would imagine Kazan's got the final game of the series because they're the first seed. So if things keep going the way they're going, it might be Omsk that go through to the final. And I think that will be a rematch from 2019, if I'm not mistaken. I think 2018 was Kazan and CSKA Moscow. 2019 was Omsk and CSKA Moscow, and Moscow took it, whereas Kazan took it the year before. So all of these teams know what it's like to be this deep in the playoffs. And the other thing is...
Yes, you're right.
In Chris's playoff streak. So we mentioned, obviously, as the episodes have gone by, that every single series in the KHL Gagarin Cup playoffs this year has had a game go to overtime. Both the Kazan-Omsk series and the Moscow-St. Petersburg series each had a game go to overtime as well. So provided there's an overtime game in the final, whenever that takes place within the next couple of days or so after this goes out, then we're going to have an overtime game in every single series of the 2021 Gagarin Cup finals, which is pretty cool and pretty fun to think about. So, Chris, any other thoughts you want to add on the Gagarin Cup playoffs? Anything you want to mention?
I will add in, yes, you are right, in a repeat of the 2019 final should Omsk make it. What they will not be hoping for is a repeat of the 2019 Gagarin Cup final, because they were swept in the final by CSKA Moscow. So they'll be hoping for something completely different. From a personal point of view, and purely because of the underdog side of it, I would like Omsk to win Game 7 and then get through into the final. Coming up against a tough CSKA Moscow side, it will be obviously a tough final matchup for Omsk, but I think it will be a really good final matchup anyway. And as you said, I'm sure one of those games will probably go to overtime, and we'll have all 15 series have a game go to overtime,
which is crazy, and it'll be a lot of fun to sit there. We'll very much be able to isolate each specific game when it comes to the Gagarin Cup finals and really talk about the players. This is the thing,
because now we're going to be in the Gagarin Cup finals. By the time we record next week, we'll probably have only had 2 or maybe 3 games of it.
Yeah.
You'll be there like, well, this is what happened in Game 1. This is what happened in Game 2. Like, this is when we're so deep now into the playoffs in this podcast, there are so few games to talk about in comparison to take a random time in November when every league was playing and we were talking about 3 games a week across 11 leagues.
Although to be fair, it's a interesting and a refreshing change of pace to kind of isolate specific games and go, oh, well, these teams, they did really well like early on in the series. And it's also worth mentioning that Kazan hadn't lost a game so far before this series. You've got teams that looked indestructible before looked invincible, but, you know, another team has managed to knock them down a pedestal or whatever. Like, we can talk about all the different narratives that have taken place, the players that have really stood up and stepped up for their teams. Obviously, Ilya Kovalchuk for Omsk. I think he's a co-captain of Omsk.
Yeah.
I think he might be the legitimate captain now, because there's some I think there's some health issues going on with Alexei Emelin, which really sucks. I think he's got liver problems, which is awful. But yeah, so either Omsk or Kazan are going through, and we're going to have a repeat of 2018 or 2019. So like we've mentioned, the parity of the league is getting better, but we're still getting those top dogs right up there competing for the championship every single year, as you would kind of expect from the teams that win the championships. They know how to keep the core together. So yeah, that's a look at the KHL. I feel like we've talked about everything we really need to about the KHL this week.
Yep.
I've tried to order these leagues in order of kind of how deep they're into the playoffs. Balanced it between how deep they're in the playoffs with kind of their position in the European hockey circuit. So they're not completely there, but bear with me. So next we're going to move on to the Czech Extraliga. I think that'll be the next best one to move on to, because they are very much towards the end of their conference final stage, similar to the KHL, but they started a lot later, it's worth mentioning. Although, to be fair, a lot of first-round buys for the top 4 seeds. So the semi-finals, really interestingly, we mentioned last week and the week before, the 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds all made it through. Both series are going to 7 games, which is really interesting. Like, it's not that often that you see. It just goes to show you how close a lot of these teams are, especially when I believe Liberec was 2-0 up in that series last week.
But they were 3-0 up.
Oh,
it
wow.
Was something I was going to put back. Sparta Prague have won 5-0, 3-2 and 3-2 to come back from an elimination game.
Wow.
From being 3-0 down, and they have pulled it back to 3-3, and they've got tomorrow the home ice advantage in that game 7.
Wow.
The Trinek Mlada Boleslav game has been much more back and forth. It has been 1-0, 1-0, 2-1, 2-2, 3-2, 3-3. That one is also tomorrow. So again, by the time this comes out on Friday, the Czech Extra League we will also know the finalists for that as well.
Absolutely. And I think also now that we mentioned, didn't we, Chris, or it's something that we discussed last week, how because each of the top 4 seeds had a first round bye, because they all swept their opponents in the second round, it was really difficult to gauge how these 4 teams were going to perform once they went up against each other, because let's be perfectly honest, they got a week or so of rest in that first round. They very easily handled each of their opponents in the second round. So it's a case of, okay, like who's going to be, we have no idea who's going to be the team that, you know, stands out. And obviously Liberec was the team that kind of took the jump early, but they haven't been able to sustain it the entire time. Or maybe that's a testament to kind of how Sparta Prague have kind of dug their heels in and grinded it out and picked up a few extra wins. But we're in a position where we can't really say, oh, it's probably going to be a 1 and 2 seed in the finals, or a 3 and 2 seed in the finals, or something like that. Like, it could literally go either way for both series, which makes it very exciting, especially because there's been the 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds, and it's kind of very conventional in that sense. But we can't really predict what's going to happen, can we?
No, and I think in a game 7, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But the intensity is guaranteed to be there.
Which, you know, I'm sure Czech fans will enjoy immensely, which is great. It's nice to see that we're getting some competitive series towards the end. You always expect the series to get more and more competitive and much closer the deeper you get into the postseason. We've seen that with the KHL playoffs. We're seeing it with the Czech Extraliga playoffs. So it's nice to see that there is a bit of parity between the top 4 teams. It isn't just one team completely bulldozing through the rest of the league. There's a bit of competition going there between each of the different teams. So 1 and 4 seed, 2 and 3 seed, which ones are going through to the finals? We'll know by this time next week, but right now we couldn't tell you at all, because your guess is as good as ours pretty much at this point. Like, you could have kept tabs on it as much as you wanted throughout the season, but, you know, how are we supposed to know? Right, let's move on to the Danish Metaligaen next, because they, as far as I'm aware, have reached their playoff finals. They're about to start their playoff finals. So we were in the semi-final stage last time we looked at this. Obviously, they haven't played a game yet in the final stage. That would make sense. And it was once again the 1 and 4 seed going up against each other in the 2 and 3 seed. And once again, very conventionally, the 1 seed beat the 4 seed and the 2 seed beat the 3 seed. So 5-game series for the Rungstead Sea Capitals, my boys, and Sondersjijk, and then the Aalborg Pirates and Esbjerg Energy was a 6-game series. So there were a couple of games won by the losing teams. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to get them through. So the final series for the Danish Metal League in 2021 playoffs is the first seed Rungstead Sea Capitals, my boys, and the second seed Aalborg Pirates. Chris, is there anything in particular you want to mention about the Danish Metal League?
I mean, it's pretty quick. It's worth noting that Sondersjijk took game 1 in that series. So there is that to contend with there, and then obviously Rungstead just turn it up. The Aalborg Esbjerg series was a lot closer. It was 2-2 before Aalborg took those final 2 games, but it's kind of what we've seen in the past as well, is that in these kind of small leagues, when you have like differences in budgets and teams and that sort of thing, you do tend to see a lot of this 1-2 in the playoff finals. So it'll be interesting to see that game. That series starts on Friday. So we'll just keep our eye on that when next week, and then in a fortnight's time, we may well have it done.
Yeah, we may have our new 2021 regular season or playoff champion for the Danish Metal League, in which will it be the regular season champion, or will the lower seed manage to make the upset? That'll be very interesting to keep an eye out on. It's interesting that you mentioned, like, obviously a lot of these lower leagues and the budgets involved, there's a lot of top heavy teams. Like, the leagues are very top heavy in terms of the ones with the bigger budgets can get the better players in, usually have the more success. But it is really interesting how we're seeing that kind of trend of the top seeds pretty much through every single kind of playoff series that we've looked at so far. It's kind of like from the KHL down to the Polish league, it's all been very similar except for Krakow. Krakow's kind of been the only team that's really stood out as an underdog. Olomouc was obviously pretty good in the Czech Extra League, but they only made it past the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, other than Krakow in the Polish league, everything else is kind of very much run to the script that you would expect when it comes to the seeds, the best teams in the regular season going deep into the playoffs. Like, you would expect that to happen. They've been the best teams all season long. You would expect that to continue. But yeah, it's interesting to see how these leagues pan out. And we'll see what happens with this league. Let's move on to the Austrian league now. The Ice Hockey League, because that's also in the finals. However, it's a little bit further ahead compared to the Danish Metal League. And interestingly, the second seed is currently committing a bit of an upset on first-seeded Bolzano. So I'm pretty sure we mentioned last week that obviously Bolzano had won in 6 games to Vienna, and Klagenfurt had won in 5 games to Red Bull Salzburg. Yep. Klagenfurt won the best Austrian team in the league trophy last week, which we had a very triumphant celebration. Exactly, we gave them a big celebration. They really deserved it. And I should stop being so mean to the Austrian league. They're fine. They're chill. There's no problem with them. They just go about their business. But yeah, so first seed, once again, similar in this league to the other leagues we've looked at. First seed Bolzano against second seed Klagenfurt. Interestingly though, Klagenfurt 2-0 up. How have those games gone? Like, what's the differentials in those games? And is there anything interesting to keep an eye out on for the future, Chris?
Yeah, so I don't get the stats as much for the Austrian league on flash scores, but Klagenfurt, they won game 1 6-0.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So they really just blew Bolzano out the water in game 1. Game 2 was a lot closer. It was a win by 5-4 in that one.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot closer. They were 5-3 up, and then Bolzano got one back with 1 minute and 3 seconds to go. So blown out the water in the first game away from home. And then at home, they won by 5-4. So they are 2-0 up and looking good to claim an Austrian title. But we've seen in the Czech Extraliga with Sparta Prague and Liberec, it's not out of the question that Bolzano can come back into this. Don't forget, though, of course, that these are the two teams that battled all the way throughout the season. Bolzano won the regular season by 3 points, and that purely came down to overtimes. They won the same number of games in regulation. So these two teams were really going at it. So, it could be a tighter series, but maybe Klagenfurt have just got a little bit too much. Also worth noting, of course, that both these teams already qualified for the Champions Hockey League for next season as well.
Yes, and it's also worth mentioning that Klagenfurt, I imagine if the Ice Hockey League goes under the traditional kind of playoff schedule, they won both of those games in Bolzano, which is pretty impressive.
No, they do The
they do
Austrian
one
league,
and
they just
right.
alternate back and forth.
See,
It's 1-1.
I knew that there was one league that does that because we've mentioned it a few times, and I wasn't sure if it was the ice hockey league. So they've won one game at home and one game away. So home ice advantage isn't a thing for Bolzano, but it certainly is for Klagenfurt, and they're getting the job done. And like you mentioned, would take HC Sparta Prague for example. Sure, they're going up against the 4th seed in the playoffs in their current series, and this is a 1 and 2 seed. But if you were to put money on these two, on which two teams after the regular, or the first round of the regular season, I should say, that were probably going to end up in the finals, you would have made a good bet by saying these two. Like, let's be honest, like you said, they were kind of head and shoulders above the rest of the competition. Yeah, there was the second half of the regular season, the winners-losers stage, which obviously evened the playing field a little bit more. But these two were the teams that kind of stood above the rest. I am surprised to see a team like Klagenfurt sitting up there, but then again, once you mention... the only difference between these two teams come the end of the first part of the season was a couple of overtime losses or overtime wins, then, it really goes to show you that, there wasn't really that much between these teams. And it's also, it's really interesting to see that, like, Klagenfurt obviously got the jump in that first game with that 5-0 victory, but the fact that the second game was... 6-0 victory. But the fact that the second game was only decided by a single goal shows that I get the feeling that Bolzano weren't expecting to kind of get hit out the gate that quickly, and they're thinking, right, we really need to turn this up now. And judging by how they've played this season, I think they're capable of doing it. So I hope this isn't a series that ends up being swept. I very much imagine this being a 6-7 game series. I can fully imagine that Bolzano can come back and win a couple of games in this series and maybe even take the lead in the series, because that's been the kind of team that they've been all season long. So anything else you want to add about the Ice Hockey League before we move on, Chris?
Not really. So they've got game 3 on Friday, game 4 on Sunday. So game 5, if necessary, would be Tuesday.
Okay.
So could be done when we record next week. Could not be. We'll have to see what happens with that. I think if Klagenfurt take game 3 on the road, then it is obviously a tall order for Bolzano to come back and claim the title. Whereas if Bolzano make it 2-1, then it's going to be much more of a tight-knit series and could easily go the distance. I think if Klagenfurt go 3-0 up, I think it's more likely to be a 5-game series, maybe even a 4 or 5-game series, where if Bolzano get it to 2-1, I can see it going to 6 or 7.
Absolutely. And you would expect that given by how the statistics go in terms of wins and losses either way. So that's a look at the last league that's kind of deep into the postseason. We haven't got many other leagues that are in the finals, because it's worth mentioning, like we talked about last week, the Polish league is now done. The Norwegian league was obviously cancelled, and the French league regular season is complete. So
so if the 11 leagues, we're down to 8 now, of which 4 of them are like in their conference finals. So
exactly. So guys, we're really running out of stuff to talk about. We're just gonna have to sit here and ramble about kind of mid-20-year-old stuff. So let's move on to the leagues that are in their playoffs, but they're pretty early on, or kind of getting towards the middle stages and not so much the latter stages. Let's talk about the Swedish Hockey League next. They're finally in their playoffs. They've had their first round. So reminder for you guys, it confused me very much last episode, but I got a grasp of it, and I'll remind you because it's very similar for the National League and the Finnish Liga. So the 1st through the 6th seeds all got a first round bye. It was only the 8th and 9th seed in the Swedish Hockey League and the 7th and 10th seeds that got to go through to technically the second round of the playoffs, the quarterfinals. So 1st through 6th got a bye in that first round. It's only 4 teams that were going against each other, and now we're quite a ways through the technically the second round of the playoffs. So the Växjö Lakers are up against the 8th seed Färjestad, and Växjö 3-0. I mean, they're looking to sweep. They're the first seed in the entire league this year. I'm not really that surprised by that. It sucks that we might get a sweep there for Färjestad fans, but not bad. Then you have Skellefteå against Luleå, the 4th and 5th seed, 1-1 each. So I would imagine if some of these other series have been played 3 games, they've only played 2. They might be playing tonight. There might be some fixtures coming up with either today or tomorrow, something like that. Then we have the 2nd seed Rögle against the 7th seed Frölunda. Frölunda obviously won 2-1 in the first round against Djurgården. The 10th seed, 2-1, because it was a 3-game series that first round. Rögle are up 3-0. Frölunda played yesterday. I finally got round to adding a couple of the other European teams that I follow from other leagues, or I have a connection to them. Like, for example, the Zurich Lions of the Swiss National League, because I went to Zurich's arena and got to watch a game there. And Frölunda, because I want to keep an eye on them because they win the Champions Hockey League every year. So I've started to finally on my flash scores get them into my teams list. And I saw that Rögle, I think, won 4-5-0 by the end of that game against Frölunda.
Frölunda have just not shown up to this series at all. So game 1, Rögle won by 4-0. Game 2, they won 5-2. And game 3 in Frölunda, they won 5-0. Frölunda have scored 2 goals in 3 games in this series. They have just not shown up in the slightest. Conceded 14, scored 2. And that's why it's 3-0. I mean, that just says everything, really.
And that's why you might need to get the brooms out, folks. So then the final series is Leksand against Örebro, which is, interestingly, the 6th seed is beating the 3rd seed in this. 2-0 in favour of Örebro against Leksand. So, I mean, we could have the only potential upset, as it looks right now, in this second round of the playoffs. And it's also worth mentioning that Färjestad beat Malmö in the first round, the 8th seed and the 9th seed, by 2-0, and they got through to go against Växjö. I forgot to mention that early on. So the first round of the playoffs, Färjestad beat Malmö, and Frölunda beat Djurgården. Then you have Växjö getting ready to sweep Färjestad. Skellefteå and Luleå, 1 game each, so all to play for there. Rögle against Frölunda. Rögle is getting ready to get the broom out. And then the only kind of upset that we see at the moment, Örebro, 2-0 up against Leksand. A surprising finish in 3rd for them, considering they're a much smaller club in the Swedish Hockey League, but impressive nonetheless. So, Chris, what do you want to say about the Swedish Hockey League?
Yeah, so I've already mentioned, obviously, Frölunda just did not show up. Växjö, you kind of expect that. And obviously the other games, there are only 2 in. So Skellefteå, Luleå, 1 apiece. You kind of expect that because of how close they were in the regular season. There's only 5 points between them in the regular season. And that was pretty much all down to overtimes again. I like Örebro in this. They completely just threw Leksands out the water by 6-1 away from home. First game, second game, they then won 2-1 as well. There are a set of games. In fact, everybody is playing today as we're recording this. And then the Skellefteå series and the Leksand series also have a game tomorrow. So by the time this comes out, there'll be another 2 games played when we're recording it. So it could be, it could be just completely, it could be free. It could be Växjö through, 3-1, Rögle through, and Örebro through by the time this actually comes out.
Good point.
Which is another reason why we might look at doing live next year.
Yeah, but I feel like the people that tune in every week, they keep along the same journey as we do. So it's true. I don't know how much our viewers keep looking at the scores and stuff outside of watching the podcast. If they specifically stick to the podcast, then they're kind of following that same journey as well, aren't they? So the kind of go for it.
On our social medias, then let us know kind of when in the week you listen or watch, just so we can get some kind of idea.
Yeah,
do you know it's coming on a Friday and then always watch it on a Friday, or do you just wait and do it at the weekend? By which point, even if we did a Friday, it would be that'll help us judge. There is another thing to talk about with the Swedish Hockey League. Don't know if you were aware of it, but there's the Play Out series as well.
Oh yes,
in the Swedish Hockey League.
I'll get that up.
Where Brynäs are currently, it's just on the tab next to the playoffs. Brynäs are 2-1 up against HV71. Every single game has been a 2-1 game. The first game went to overtime. The second game didn't go to overtime. And the third game, no, that didn't either. But every single game has been 2-1. So they're really, that is also a best of 7 in the play-out series. So we'll keep our eye on that as well, as both of those teams aim to stay in the Swedish Hockey League. Of course, Brynäs finished 6 points ahead of HV71 in the regular season.
I completely forgot about the play-out round, so thanks for reminding me, Chris. I didn't even have it up. I was like, we're just talking about the playoffs at the moment, la la la. So yeah, and I mean, obviously the kind of point differential between the two teams at the end of the season, you would expect Breenas to be up at this point in the series, and if they end up being the team that goes down, God, they're going to be a little bit annoyed considering the point differential at the end of the end of the year and the end of the regular season. But that's why you have a play-out round. You have to play well until the end of the year, or I mean, the two teams haven't necessarily played well all year long. That's why they're in this position. But
interesting. And I don't know if this is actually a thing. If there's then a second thing in the play-out round, I'm not sure. But they do it in Scottish football.
Oh, you love a good reference to Scottish football, don't you, Chris?
Right. So at the end of the season, the team who came, like the bottom team goes down and the top team in the tier below goes up.
Right.
But like the second bottom team in the tier above and the second team in the game below, they have like a series. And then if the team at the bottom of the higher league wins that series, they stay there. And if not, it gets switched. I don't know if that's the thing. So if Breenas and HV71 play their series and then they have to then face whoever wins Division 2, it probably isn't, but it might be an interesting thing to see.
See, the biggest thing that I've learned from this podcast series since we started it back in August of last year is that I don't understand Scottish football. And I don't want to understand Scottish football. It's one of those things that it's like I didn't realise it was so complicated, and now I'm just like, okay. Right. Who knew football could be so complicated, ladies and gentlemen? This is why we stick to hockey here. So, that's a look at the Swedish Hockey League. So, the play-out round is still very much underway. The playoffs are still very much underway also. By the time we come back next week, I'll imagine we should be getting close or well underway in the conference final, the semi-final stage.
Yeah.
You would think so, given the fact it's going to be a week on and some of these series are close to being swept, but they don't start until all of the series are done, so one of them might go to 7 games and take a little while longer. It's interesting that they have games on back-to-back days in the playoffs in the Swedish Hockey League this year. I wonder if that's to get ready for the World Championships or if that's a usual thing, because back-to-back playoff games isn't a common occurrence as far as I'm aware in kind of the big leagues in Europe. So
this time next year, we'll have a much better understanding of all of these leagues.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah, this time next year, if everything actually goes back to normal, which we hope it does, it's been a while, then, they might be like, oh, we're going back to normal. It's not as confusing for you, Hayden. I'll be like, oh, thank goodness. It's a tough enough job as it is. So let's move on to the Swiss National League now, Chris, because they don't have a play-out round this year. So I don't need to worry about that, because they do have the teams like sitting there in the standings, but the Swiss Hockey Federation or whatever it's called, kind of the higher-ups decided no play-out round this year. So the first round was very similar to the Swedish Hockey League. The first 6 teams that finished the regular season, the top 6 teams got a first-round bye. Then it was the 8th and 9th team and the 7th and 10th team going at it for the first round in order to kind of secure their position in the proper playoffs, if you want to call it. So SC Bern, it's actually really interesting this first round. Both of the lower seeds managed to get the victories here. So SC Bern managed to take a 2-1 victory. It's a best of 3, by the way. So SC Bern won 2-1 over HC Davos. And then the Rapperswil Jona Lakers beat BLBN 2-0. So a sweep there for them. A 2-1 series for Bern. And that means that both of the lower seeds managed to make it through to the kind of proper playoffs, which, wow, when's the last time we saw that happen in Europe this year, Chris?
Yeah.
So
the other thing, the thing I found interesting here is that, and I don't know if this is the case or not. Well, they've done it to plan for it, but Zug, who are the top seed, are facing Bern, who are the 9th seed. Yet Rapperswil got through, and they are the 10th seed. So it hasn't worked like that. But the way that it has looked is what the league have done is they've gone, right, in theory, the highest seeds always win, which means that the 7th seed will win. So we'll give Zug the 8th seed, which would have been Davos. And obviously it hasn't quite worked that way round, but it does mean that, okay, they have still taken game 1 against SC Bern by 4-2, but it means they haven't got the easiest route through to the final because a lower ranked side is still in there. Yeah. Whereas we've seen with other leagues, they keep swapping the brackets around to give the top seed the easiest route.
Yeah, it's very interesting looking at the kind of flash scores, kind of the playoff tree or the tournament tree. It has the Davos Bern series sitting next to EV Zug, so I'd imagine they've thought, right, well, it's going to be the winner of this because regardless, like because we would have even been in the situation where if the 10th seed goes through, then and the 8th seed goes through, then judging by this, Zug still would have played the 8th seed instead of the 10th seed. So yeah, I'm very interested to see what
because flash scores do alter the bracket graphics depending on who's playing who. But I suppose it's more like the NHL system, I suppose, then, isn't it? Whereas even if you don't get the easiest route through, that's just the route you've got. Yeah, there is obviously the argument of to become the champions, you've got to beat everybody and be better than everybody. So it doesn't matter who you play well and when, you've still got to beat them.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those little pet peeves I have of some like other sports leagues around the world. This is kind of off topic, but you know, like I agree with that sentiment, Chris. Like if you want to be the best, you've got to beat the best, and I feel like that goes the same through the regular season. Like you've got to at least play every single team. I feel like you can't really be crowned like the best team in a league if you don't actually play every single other team in the competition. It's such a strange like concept to me. Obviously some of you might argue, okay, well, the Ice Hockey League doesn't do that, but they do for the first half of the season, and then they move into the winners-loser stage. So that, in my opinion, is better. But like the prime example I've got is the NFL. You know, they play. I think they're now going to be playing 17 games a season. They don't play against every single team in the league, which obviously that's how they've been doing it for 100 years now. It works for them clearly. But I'm always under the impression that like, if every team should play every single other team in the league, because otherwise you can't have the best team in the league. It's kind of the best team out of that bunch. I guess they do it based on kind of divisions. It's not like a complete league standing. Maybe there's certain like I can understand the arguments the other way, but I don't know. I just feel like you say, Chris, if you want to be crowned the best, you have to defeat the best. And yeah, you might not go up against the 1, 2, 3 seed every single round of the playoffs or whatever, but you have to play teams that legitimately made it there because they earned their place beating or playing the rest of the teams in the league and coming out as one of the best. So. That's my thoughts.
The thing that I find interesting is how far through you get in the playoffs changes your perception on your season. Let me give you this scenario. Yeah. So say you are the top 2 teams. You're the top team and you come up against the second team in the finals and you lose in 7 games.
Okay.
Or if they just, let's say, did the playoff bracket completely out of a hat, and the first 2 teams came up against each other in the first round and you lost in 7 games. The perception of your season would be, oh, well, we lost in the first round, but you got beaten by the same score by the same team as you would have in the finals, yet the perception is completely different.
Yeah, I guess it's because obviously the deeper you get into the postseason, the more likely it is that you have the chance to win the cup and you're one of, say, 2 or 4 teams left standing. So obviously the chance of you getting it, and I think it's also kind of the crushing blow that it gives to fans that they get so close, but then they're still so far away from the championship. Obviously, like losing in the first round sucks and it's terrible. Chris, you're a Leafs fan, you'd understand. Like it sucks, right? It's terrible. But at the same time, it's like if you lose that in the first round, you're like, okay, well, we sucked. Well, we weren't very good from the beginning. We just simply didn't play our game, and that's the way it goes. But if you have the same kind of result in the Stanley Cup finals, it's so much more crushing because you were so close to making it, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of pulling on those heartstrings a little bit and kind of being like, you followed that team the whole way through. And of course, the deeper you get, the more you're like, okay, we might actually have a chance to do this. Because teams that like they haven't made the playoffs in 10 years or they haven't made it past the second round in like the last 5 seasons. You think, okay, well, we've made it to the playoffs, but I'll believe it when I see it. And then they start to see it, and then they go, okay, like, we're onto something here. This might, like, actually go well. And then you lose right at the last minute, and you're like, okay, I feel horrible.
It reminds me of kind of Vegas in their first season. It was just like, we've just got these players together. Let's just play a season, see what happens. Oh, we've made the playoffs. Oh, we've made the next round. Oh, we've made the next round. Oh, we're in the final.
See,
it kind of reminds me of that sort of thing.
Yeah, for a lot of hockey fans, like a lot of purists, they hate that because it's like, oh, they're an expansion team. They need to lose for at least 10 years before they get to be good because they're an expansion franchise. I love those kind of stories. Like, could you imagine sitting there, like, if that wasn't real? I know we're going off on a bit of a tangent. We'll come back to the National League in a minute, but like, it's one of those stories that. Could you imagine if that didn't happen, right? That didn't happen, and you sat there and went, okay, I'm going to tell you the story. This is something like a book idea that I've completely come up with by myself. There's a team that becomes an expansion team in the NHL in the year 2018, I think it was they first joined, 2017, 2018, something like that. They joined when, the NHL's 100 years old now. It's very well established how things work. And you go, you know what? We're going to wheel and deal a little bit. There's an expansion draft, which is very heavily in our favour, but we can wheel and deal to get a few extra pieces. That's a whole nother conversation by itself. But, if you protect the right people and give the right contracts, and we're not actually only going to start winning a few games. We're actually going to be one of the best teams in the league this season. We're not even going to be one of the best teams in the league this season. We're going to make the playoffs. And we're not even just going to make the playoffs. We're going to beat our first opponent, our second opponent, our third opponent, and we're going to come 2 wins away from the Stanley Cup in our first season ever. Now, to be fair, Vegas have the hockey gods have gone, you had your chance, now back to reality for you guys, please.
Yeah.
Because based on their kind of more recent performances. Although that said, they're still making it to the conference finals or the second round every single year, so they're really not doing that badly for themselves. But yeah, it's one of those things like that's such a great story and such a great story for hockey that an expansion team can come in and have such a great impact and kind of hit the ground running so quickly. Like you don't hear about that stuff enough. And especially considering how all the other expansion teams have done in NHL history, they suck for like 15 years before they get good. Like how it's going to be difficult, especially in a place like Vegas. It's not the most traditional hockey market. You get yourself some hardcore fans by winning immediately. It's such a great concept. But anyway, the Swiss National League.
Back to the Swiss National League.
To be fair,
they're really early on in their quarterfinals.
That's what I was going to say. There isn't really that much to talk about. So I'll just run you through it quickly, and then if there's anything else you want to add, Chris, feel free. So EV Zug, the undisputed winners of the regular season in the Swiss League this year, head and shoulders above everybody else. 1-0 up on the 9th seed Bern. Zug are obviously the 1st seed. Then Lausanne against Zurich, the 4th and 5th seed. 1-0 up for Lausanne. Then it's not scrolling for me. That's interesting. Oh, now it is. Lugano, HC Lugano are 1-0 up on the Rapperswil Jona Lakers, obviously the 10th seed, managing to sneak into that playoff series. And then Fribourg Gotteron are playing against Geneva Servette, the 3rd and 6th seed, and it is 1-0 in favour of Fribourg. So basically, the 1st seed, the 2nd seed, the 3rd seed, and the 4th seed have all won their first game of the season. God, we've heard this script before, haven't we, Chris? So what are your thoughts? Talk to me.
As you said, it's really early on. The Davos-Bern series was interesting to me. Bern winning the first game in overtime by 4-3. Davos then answering back, shutting them out 3-0, and then Bern finishing it off in that deciding game by shutting Davos out by 3-0.
Wow.
Rapperswil, as well, you said, really good showing from them to get past BL. The biggest kind of blowout in the first games of the quarterfinals was from Lugano, who won by 6-2. But even that's not the biggest of the blowouts that we've seen so far in this. So yeah, it's getting there slowly, but they are really early on in their quarterfinals and their best of 7. So we've got the Swiss National League to talk about for a good few weeks yet.
Indeed, and I think based on the fact that, like you mentioned to me before we started recording, the World Championships are coming up soon. Based on that, I would imagine that the kind of the leagues that we're talking about now, the Swedish Hockey League, the Swiss National League, the Finnish Liga, which we're about to get onto, they're going to kind of blitz through their playoffs really quickly because, they've got to get through them.
Particularly the Liga and the DEL, the final 2 leagues that we're going to talk about in a lot of detail. They've obviously adapted their playoffs this year because of the delay and the World Championships coming up.
Yeah, exactly. So let's move on to the Finnish Liga now. We decided to record today because the Finnish Liga finished yesterday. So we have the final standings of the Finnish Liga. Obviously, we've been looking at this league table for a long time now. And once again, it was done based on points per game as opposed to the overall points that they won during the season. So I'm just going to take you through the final standings, then we'll move on to the playoff brackets. We'll take through the final standings, any notable movements or changes Chris can take us through, then we'll go on to the playoffs and the playoff brackets. Once again, very similar to the previous 2 leagues we've discussed. First 6 teams get a first round bye. 7th seed goes against 10th. 8th goes against 9th in the first round. Whoever wins those 2 go through and play the other teams. So, the final standings in the 2020/21 Finnish Liga season, we had Lukko up in first place. They managed to play 60 games this season, and they had the best points per game out of anyone. 38 wins on the year, which is very impressive. 127 points, so that even still, that wasn't the most important thing, but they're 2.12 points per game. Then you have IFK Helsinki in second place with 96 points in 50 games this year. TPS Turku, 106 points in 59 games. The only reason they aren't sitting in second is because of the points per game, although they would have been the clear number 2. And then you have Tapara with 99 points in 59 games, Kalpa with 97, the Pelicans with 97 as well, both in 58 games to give the 5th and 6th seed. So all the teams first round by Lukko, Helsinki, Turku, Tapara, Kalpa and the Pelicans. Then you have Karpat, Ilves, Kuku and Vasen Sport taking the final playoff berths. I believe Vasen Sport might have jumped up there late in the season, which is pretty impressive for them. Kind of getting it also helps that they've played less games than some of the other teams, so their points per game percentage is a little bit better. So the teams that ended up missing out on the playoffs, there's 5 of them: Hämeenlinna, Asat, Saipa, Jukurit, and JYP Jyväskylä. Now, to be fair, JYP Jyväskylä, they're only 0.02 points per game to be sat in the 15th and final position in the league standings. That said, they played 2 more games than 14th place Jukurit, and they had 1 more point. So, not the best showing for Jyväskylä this year, former Champions Hockey League champions, I should say. Which is pretty crazy to see kind of how rapid the descent has been. But yeah, that's the final standings of the Finnish Liga regular season. Chris, anything you want to mention? Any movements late in the year?
What I really want to mention is how tight it was between 5th and 9th. If you look at the points per game, 1.67 down to 1.65. I've been having a look while you've been talking at those because Kalpa, the Pelicans and Karpat, all with 1.67, all with the same number of regulation wins as well. So I've been having a look at it, and it appears that it's come down to goal difference. Kalpa with plus 30, the Pelicans with plus 22, and Karpat with plus 9. Seems to be the way that has been broken. So Kalpa and the Pelicans get that first round bye. Karpat have to play Vasen Sport in the first round. Interesting, of course, Helsinki. They play far fewer games than anybody else. They still managed to come in second, 96 points, which would see them only down in 7th. But of course, they played so many fewer games than everybody else. So it was really quite tight in there. And then, as you said, we move into the playoffs where, again, the top 6, as is often the way in these leagues, have been given the first round bye. So we know the playoffs, but we don't know at all. Well, we haven't had any games yet. The first round, Ilves against Koko and Karpat against Vasen Sport. They are 2-legged affairs. They are tomorrow and Friday, and it will be an aggregate score over those 2 legs to then go through into the quarterfinals. I was doing some reading on the Liga before we started recording, and in order to get the series done before the World Championships, they are shortening the playoffs to best of 5s rather than best of 7s, and they can also, they've put on their website, shorten them further should they deem it necessary.
Interesting. So it might go to best of 3 and see where it goes, or even an aggregate 2-game aggregate series or something like that. I mean, it's given them the chance to have a bit of flexibility. Obviously, there might be some fans thinking, oh, well, it's not a real playoffs this year then because it's not the same. But, they've got to work with the situation that they're in. Just before I show quickly the playoff brackets, you've summed up the playoffs perfectly for me. It's really interesting to see that, like I mentioned, kind of the Jukurit JYP 0.02 difference down at the bottom of the standings. It really was, kind of 4th to 9th, or 4th to 8th, I should say. 4th to 9th even.
4th to 9th.
A 0.03 difference between 3 of those teams getting a first round bye and 3 of them not. Like, that's how close it was.
Yeah.
Like, if one of those teams had just won an extra game, then they could have jumped from 9th to 4th, or something like that, which is really crazy. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, Koko were on a 5-game winning streak. If I just do the really quick maths, say Koko played 1 more game and they won it,
yeah,
they would go to 94 from 56. hang on, no, 94 from 56, and they'd be on 1.67, and they'd be in there with everybody else.
Yeah.
But with their plus 40 goal difference, they'd have jumped up to 5th with one more win.
Exactly.
And got a first round bye, and yet they find themselves in 9th.
Yeah, it's crazy. It really is. So just to summarize the brackets once again. So obviously 1st through 6th have got a first round bye. So Luko, so we've got Luko, Helsinki. Luko and Helsinki are waiting to see who their opponents are based on the first series. So Ilves and Kuku, the 8th and 9th seed, like Chris mentioned, and then Karpat and Vassen Sport are going against each other. But the two brackets that we do know that are taking place in that, technically, I say like the proper first round, but it's technically the second round.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Tapara against Kalpa, the 4th and 5th seed, and then TPS Turku and the Lahti Pelicans, the 3rd and 6th seed. So those are all of the leagues that are currently in the playoffs. And, we've given a bit of a deep dive, a much deeper dive into some of them than we usually do, and talked about the NHL somehow, because we find a way. Let's move on to the only 2 leagues that are kind of in their regular season. Well, one's in their regular season, another one's more of a tournament than anything else. Let's talk about the German DEL, Chris. So we have, as it's just been announced, or it's just been seen, I think my flash scores has been updated, Chris, because there's something that Chris mentioned at the beginning. Chris was sitting there doing a bit of a quick math before we started recording the episode, and he was like, I think Bremerhaven might have also secured themselves a place in the DL playoffs, because it's not saying it on flash scores, but I've looked at the point differentials and everything, and I feel like they should be there. You can see Chris loves stats, can't you? He was right.
Within the last hour, they've updated it.
Yeah, funnily enough, Chris was right. So this is why you never doubt Chris Gadsby, everyone. So this is the standings of things are right now. So in the North Division of the German DL this year, remember, there's only a few more games left to play, I would imagine, of the season, because, the World Championships is coming up, and they are in the second half of the North Division only played in the North, the South only played in the South, but things have slightly opened up, so now there's inter-division games. So the Berlin Ice Bears are currently in the lead. They're also doing points per game in the DL, by the way. It's probably worth mentioning. So the Berlin Ice Bears currently in first place, and Bremerhaven in second. They've both secured themselves a place in the DL playoffs this year. The Wolfsburg Grizzlies and the Iserlohn Roosters currently have the 3rd and 4th seed, while Düsseldorf EG, the Cologne Sharks, and the Krefeld Penguin are currently outside of the playoff picture. That said, Düsseldorf is very close behind, although they have played more games. The Cologne Sharks is probably looking a little bit unlikely for them now, and the Krefeld Penguin, I'm sorry guys, but it's just not going to happen. Then in the South Division, you have Adler Mannheim and Red Bull Munich securing their positions in the not Champions Hockey League, the DL playoffs, although there have been some Champions Hockey League playoffs divvied up thanks to these guys.
I've worked that out as well. So.
Okay, perfect. We'll talk about that in a moment then. You can educate me on that.
Yeah, we'll talk Champions Hockey League.
Yeah, indeed. So Mannheim and Munich, they have their positions, and the 1 and 2 seed in the South. Then you have Ingolstadt and the Schweinige Wild Wings currently sitting in the other playoff positions. That said, the Straubing Tigers have gone on a bit of a resurgence. I mean, they've done all right so far this season, but they're still within a chance of making the playoffs with a sub-500 record, which is quite impressive. The Augsburg Panthers, they're a little bit out of it, and the Nuremberg Ice Tigers are very, very unlikely to make the playoffs at this point.
Yes.
Well, probably not, given the fact that there's 2 teams that have secured themselves a playoff berth. So you would imagine that 2 of the lower teams don't have a chance anymore. So that's how things stand in the DEL standings. Chris, anything you want to add?
Yes. So it is all still to play for in the North. It's a lot tighter. In the South, I believe that Ingolstadt are also in the playoffs.
Okay.
And I shall explain to you why. So the worst possible, obviously it's all been done on points per game.
How many games do the DL play this year? Just
38.
38, so there's only a few games left to go.
Everybody is playing 38, apart from the Roosters and the Tigers, who they had a game of theirs postponed because the Roosters were all in quarantine and there isn't the space to fit it in.
Yes.
So they're going to finish on 37. They were still, the last news article about it said, oh yeah, we're still going to look to get it in, but the season finishes on Sunday and there's like 3 games to get. Unless they want to play 4 games in 4 days, they're not getting it in.
Yes.
So Ingolstadt's worst possible, at the moment, they're on 1.63 points per game.
Yes.
Their worst possible points per game is 1.5.
Okay.
Now, Straubing could get to 1.51 if they win all their 3 games.
Okay.
But Schweinige can only get to 1.47. So Straubing could overtake Ingolstadt, but Schweinige can't, which means that the worst that Ingolstadt can drop down to is 4th and would still be in the playoffs.
I guess it's the argument.
That's my maths anyway.
Yeah, I guess the only other explanation might be that because Straubing, it would rely on them to lose all of their games in order for them to sit outside the playoff picture as things stand right now. Even if they win one.
What I'm saying is because Ingolstadt can only drop as low as 4th, to me, they should have that playoff arrow. But
yeah, you would think
that's
so.
That's me anyway.
But yeah,
that's
who knows?
me anyway.
I mean, I'm not the one.
So yeah, that's what we've got from there. So yeah, the season finishes on Sunday, and then we'll know about the playoffs. Again, I'll chat about the playoffs in the DEL. In order to get it done before the World Championships, all of the playoffs are best of 3.
Okay, fair enough. So kind of following the Finnish Liga's lead, and kind of understandable given that the World Championships is like 6 weeks away now. It's really not that far to go.
Yeah, so the DEL finishes on May the 6th or something like that. So that everyone then gets a couple of weeks before the World Championships. And I just want to, because we've now talked about the leagues, because the Elite Series is kind of a mini thing we'll brush on in a bit. I kind of want to talk to you about that. The comment you made at the end of the Liga about some fans going, oh, it's not a proper playoff series because it's not best of 7.
Mm-hmm.
So a question for you here is, would you rather have your shorter playoffs and have it done before the World Championships, or have your country go to the World Championships with not the strongest roster because they're still tied up playing Game 7 of the conference finals?
Obviously, yeah. So obviously, I think most fans, I think it's not so much the worry about the World Championships. I think everybody's like, if you said to the fans, well, we want our best players to be going to the World Championships because we want to try and win a gold medal, then they'd go, okay, that's fine. I think it's just more from, like we've seen with the Elite League, like us as UK hockey fans, we've seen that, whoever's going to win the trophy, everybody's going to be like, oh yeah, but it's not a real trophy, is it? Like everybody's going to say that. And I feel like
it's like the Aladdin Cup at the start of the season.
Literally, yeah, the most important trophy in all of hockey. Stanley Cup, sit down. But like, there's a lot of fans, and with the Finnish Liga doing what they're doing, and with the DL doing what they're doing, there are going to be fans, because obviously it eliminates the chance for a team that's 3-0 down to come back. You could say, well, yeah, obviously if you change the number of games, it's going to eliminate that possibility. You can make the argument that if they're 3-0 down, they probably should lose the series anyway. But and it takes away a bit of that magic. But
I think Sparta Prague would have something to say about that.
Yeah, exactly. But that said, I feel like in my opinion, you've got to think of the practicalities of it. Yeah, it sucks. I think what people forget is, I'm pretty sure the league would have loved to have had 7-game series too. Like, let's be honest, they're not doing it because they want to get rid of 7-game series. They're doing it because of the practicalities around that, and like you mentioned, being able to send their players off to the World Championships and give their country the best chance to compete for a gold medal at the event. Like, yeah, the domestic league is important, but when it's not a real year anyway, like they've had to do a completely different setup in the DL with the North and South Division to what they'd usually do anyway. Like, it's a completely different season this year. So if you're going to make it completely different, you could make the argument like go hard or go home, like let's make everything completely different for the sake of it, why not? Because then you can kind of have your reset next season and, go back to normal and everything continues again. So I certainly get what you mean. I think the argument that you present is an absolutely fair one. The fact that, like, come on, the World Championships is more important, especially
it's my counter argument to the fans.
Yes.
That go, it's not a proper one.
No, absolutely, especially for like if there are players that are playing on non-playoff teams. It's like, yeah, like we want to go to the World Championships and like teams that are eliminated in the first round. It's like, yeah, we'd rather get. Some of them would obviously want to win a DL championship. Of course they would. Like, they want to win. Like, players want to win, but if they're given the chance to go and play for Team Germany and have a best of 3 series or play a best of 7 series and miss the tournament, I think you'd know the answer. Like, if you ask the players, you'd know the answer you'd get, and it's probably, they'd want to go.
Yeah.
So, that's a look at the German DEL. We've only got one more league, inverted commas, to look at.
Yes. Do you want to cover the Champions Hockey League first? Because there is that DEL league we were talking about earlier.
Please do.
To it.
Please do.
So, the Champions Hockey League, it's been a really busy week in the Champions Hockey League.
Yes.
We've got 5 new teams that are in there, and there are some links to it as well. So there are now only 9 qualification spots left for next year's Champions Hockey League. So first edition is IFK Helsinki, because they came up second in the Finnish Liga. Which was finished yesterday, so they are now in the Champions Hockey League as well. Yunots Minsk from Belarus, the Belarusian champions. They won their 10th championship on Wednesday.
Wow.
They're now in the Champions Hockey League. Red Bull Salzburg are in as the final Ice Hockey League qualifiers for next season. Because the Vienna Capitals didn't get to the championship final, Salzburg as the 3rd place team in the regular season get there. So that's that one as well. And then TPS Turku have qualified, and Germany's Adler Mannheim has become the first DEL qualifier. If we look at the list of qualified teams, so the Austrian Ice Hockey League, so you've got Bolzano and Klagenfurt. We already knew that. Those 2 are in. And then what they've done is they've taken the highest ranked semi-finalist. So if we look at the Austrian Ice Hockey League, because in the standings, Salzburg ranked 3rd and Vienna ranked 4th, Salzburg get the Champions Hockey League spot. If Vienna had got to the final, even if they lost in the final, they'd have got the Champions Hockey League spot.
Yeah.
So it has become the top 3 there. Belarus, you've got the Minskin. In the Czech Republic, we had the 2 sides from there. In Denmark, Sonderjysk, who were the Continental Cup. Then in Finland, you've got the teams from the Liga who finished the regular season, I believe, as the top 3. Lukko, IFC Helsinki, and TPS Turku. Those are the top 3, weren't they? Yes. France, you've got the Rouen Dragons as the French League Magnus champions. Now, in Germany, you have the top 3 already. Adler Mannheim, Red Bull Munich, and Isbären Berlin. I've worked this out. It's because those 3 teams are already guaranteed to finish with the most points.
Right, okay.
Even though the league isn't done. And I worked this out because obviously at the moment in the Champions Hockey League, you've got 2 of the leagues. And I'll be honest, I can't remember this year which 2 it was. Bear with me. It is Sweden and Switzerland get 5 teams. Okay. Germany and Finland get 4. So you can't use the playoffs.
Yeah.
When you need an odd number of teams, which is why they're using a lot of the regular season finishings to decide the teams that go into the Champions Hockey League. You would think, it's the playoff winners all the time, but it tends to be the league champions. In Norway, there's Friskaska. Poland, you've got Jastrzębie because they won their championship.
Yep.
So Poland have done it on the playoff winners rather than the league winners because Tichy won the league, of course. In Sweden, 4 already. You've got Rögle, Växjö, Leksands, and Frölunda as the champions. And then you've got in Switzerland, Zug, Lugano, Fribourg-Gotteron, and Lausanne, the top 4 sides there. And in the UK, you've got Cardiff Devils. So Sweden and Switzerland still have 1 place up for grabs. I'm guessing that may well be the playoff winners.
I would have thought so, yeah.
Just to fill, because they're already in the playoffs, so they would have announced it if it was the league.
Obviously, if one of the teams, it's the highest rank left, yeah. And
because if it was just done purely on the leagues, they'd have already announced it.
Yes. So who are the other leagues that we're waiting to hear from? Because you said there's about 9 spots left to go, right?
Yes, there should be 9 spots.
Or is this the year that they've kind of reduced the amount of spots?
No, that's coming up next year.
Oh, okay.
So we've got the DEL. They are. It says Isbären Berlin are likely to become the second team. More qualifiers are expected to come. The Swiss National League has 1 place left for their national champion, so they've got the playoff winners.
So that's SHL Switzerland. Yep.
Yeah, so if the championship is won by a team already qualified, so if the championship's won by one of the top 4 teams, then the Zurich Lions get the final spot.
Oh, so they're doing it based on the next team in the regular season standings then?
If the championship is won by a team already qualified.
Yeah. Interesting.
So if the 6th seed wins the playoffs, then they get it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The SHL, let me just have a look at that. 4 teams stand a chance of qualifying: Feyestad, Lelea, Skellefteå, and Orebro. So there will be the teams that are not already qualified from the league that are in the playoffs.
Yep.
If one of these teams win the championship, then they get in. But if one of the teams already qualified, then either Frölunda, Rögle, Växjö, or Leksands, then the final SHL qualification place goes to the 4th place team, which is Skellefteå. So Skellefteå have got 2 chances to get in, essentially. The Czech Extraliga, it's in its semi-final stage. Already qualified are Sparta Prague and Ocelari Trinek. There is 1 space left in there, I think. Liberec have to win the whole final. Maybe there's only 2 for the Czech Extra League. If you hadn't sprung this on me, I'd have written this all down.
I'm sorry. We could talk about it next week if you want.
Yeah, I will do. I'll get that down for next week. So Liberec can get in if they win the final. The Finnish Liga, this must have been done on Monday because it says the Finnish Liga is here in the playoffs. The league's final qualification spot is reserved for the national champions, which will be whoever wins the playoffs. Denmark's Metal Liga. Rungsted, the 2019-20 participants, face Aalborg, the 2018-19 participants. Whoever wins that gets that place.
Come on, Rungsted, my boys.
Because obviously Denmark has got 2 this year because of
Sondersjæk.
Sondersjæk, yes.
Yeah, indeed, because of the Continental Cup. Interesting. Okay. I'll give you a chance to kind of further research that and get back to us next week.
I'll write it all down. Yeah, I'll write it all down next week.
No worries.
There was
all
this do they, don't they, the short term. But yes, I will do that for next week.
Not a problem.
So yes, just this Elite Series thing then.
Right, so I'll take you through the standings then, Chris. I want to get your thoughts because I don't know if you've got much to say about it. I feel like you've got a few things. So, right, so there's 12 games played for each team this season and we're about halfway through already. That's gone quick, isn't it? So
it has really, hasn't it?
Sheffield, 6 games played, 10 points. They are on a 4-game winning streak. And I think they've won, 5 of their first 6? Yeah, 5 of their first 6. They're 5-0-1. So 10 points to them, clear out ahead. The Manchester Storm currently in second place with 5 games played, 6 points in that span. 1 regulation win, 2 overtime wins, and 2 losses. The Coventry Blaze, they also have 6 points, but they've played 1 more game than the Manchester Storm. They have 2 regulation wins, 2 overtime losses, and 2 losses for 6 points. And then the Nottingham Panthers, 1 win, 4 losses, 2 points on the season. Chris, what are your thoughts? Go for it.
Okay, well, the first thing that jumps out at me is Sheffield having just shy of 6 goals per game.
Yeah, that's pretty
34
impressive.
34 goals in 6 games, which is nearly double what anybody else has got.
Yeah.
That's Sheffield roster. And again, I'm going back to this again. I'm kind of not taking this series too seriously because it is all about just getting the GB players up.
That's exactly what a Panthers fan would say.
Whatever. And the rosters are... You know me, I would say this if Panthers had gone 5-0.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Games.
Absolutely. I'm just making a joke. Don't worry.
The fact is, these teams are to such an extent not the actual teams. Like, for example, Ben Bounds would never normally play for Nottingham.
Well, yeah.
And these teams have been thrown together. We've got essentially whatever players are available, predominantly from Norway,
yep.
to come and play. And, it's all just about getting the GB players ready. And yet there are some people and certain organizations on social media which seem to feel that this is the biggest thing possible. And it's so important, which I do understand because they've not had anything for a year.
Yeah.
But it's a similar thing and there's one thing that struck me earlier. I think I saw it yesterday and I just thought it was completely unnecessary. And it was off a Yorkshire Sides Playing Orange account. And
why don't you just say their name, Chris? Come on, out with it.
And, it said, because you'll know from looking on social media that the league is doing like a 50-50 at every game.
Yes.
And the tweet went something along the lines of, don't forget, this isn't a Panthers 50-50, so play it. And it's like, well, even if it was a Panthers 50-50, like it wouldn't really matter. Like it's this whole thing of hockey not being together as a whole. And it just struck me as just struck me as a bit petty.
Yeah, I do see where you're coming from with that. I think there are some tweets, especially from, I'm going to say it, the Sheffield Steelers account. There are some tweets that I'm like, really? Well, I mean, I'm not affiliated with any of these teams, so I can say whatever the hell I want. So yeah, it's like one of the Sheffield Steelers. Like there are some of the comments that they make on their social media that I'm like, really? Like, did you really need to say that? Like, was that entirely necessary?
Yeah.
But on the flip side, it buys more into that rivalry. They know that if they do that, they're going to get a response on social media. They know that it's going to rile up the fans, and it builds on the rivalry, and it makes it more intense. Like, I agree with you that this tournament kind of doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. It's getting our guys playing time. It's nice to see some of our British guys playing well in this tournament. I've heard some mixed responses still about the whole, like, Elite League TV package. I must admit, I was planning to buy a game or two. I haven't bought a single game yet.
I haven't either, and it doesn't fill me with confidence because I see regularly that there have been issues.
Yeah. To be honest,
and
not buying it has kind of felt like the best investment I could have made so far.
Kind of has to me as well, particularly seeing as obviously I would buy Panthers games and it's been like an 8-4 loss, 3-1 loss, 3-1 loss, 3-2 loss. It's just not, and as well, and I don't know if this is just me, but because you would have to pay £13 to watch it live, and because I can't actually go there, and bear in mind that like you can get a ticket for kind of like 18.
Yeah.
I'm just watching the highlights and I see the goals, and that is kind of fine. And I'm taking 10 minutes of my day when I've got a chance, rather than feeling I have to sit down for 2.5 hours to watch it. So I'm kind of, and particularly, kind of the weather is nice. I'm out in the garden doing stuff for the garden and this skip and all the rest of it. I kind of feel like that's a better use of my time at the moment, which is, it kind of feels strange that I'm actively kind of like not watching the ice hockey, but then at the same time, and I suppose maybe it's slightly different for me because I have been going to the Lions games and there are more coming up, which I'll do as a footnote once we finish up. But I don't know if that makes it slightly different for me or what, but I haven't felt the desire to spend £13 and sit down and watch the games when I can watch the highlights. And I've also not felt as though I've been missing the games.
Do you know what, Chris? That's literally the exact same way that I've been feeling. Like, I've very much been in a position, like, I watch pretty much every single New York Rangers game I can. Like, I stay up till... The good thing is, because they're only playing within their certain conferences, there's no 3:00 games this year. So they're all midnight kind of time or matinee games for, like, European Game of the Week or whatever. So they're always, like, either a European-friendly time or they start at midnight, end at about 2:30 in the morning. I'm usually up at that kind of time anyway, because I'm talking to my girlfriend who lives in Canada, and the time difference is kind of the only time we can really talk, because she works, I work, etc., etc. I almost, in a way, kind of feel a little bit guilty sometimes, because I'm like, I really should be supporting, like, British hockey. Like,
I know what you mean.
This tournament's on, like, I should be picking up a few games, like I've been sitting here being like, I've really missed hockey, like, I'd love it to come back. But like you mentioned, at the same time, I like work, like I do the work with my channel, and I'm like researching, writing, editing scripts all the time. I take every once in a while I do have a bit of spare time, and I think, you know what, I'm going to do something that isn't related to hockey, which I feel like that's a fair thing to do. But yeah, it's just one of those things that, like, I sit there and, like, why the NHL games and the New York Rangers games work out so well for me is because at midnight, I'm not really doing any work. I'm not really doing anything else. So it's kind of like, now's the time I can sit back and watch a New York Rangers game, because I've been following them for like years now. But the Elite League games, when they start at like 7:00, it's like, I'm getting ready to, I'm doing some research for a script. I'm editing. or
like me, I'm cooking and then eating.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like cooking and eating dinner, and it's like I don't really want to have to go through the process of going and paying £13 for this game, which, by the looks of it, might not run completely correctly as it should do. So, yeah, I get what you mean. It's kind of almost a bit of like guilt to it, being like, I really should be supporting this, and like I have been wanting this hockey to come back, like. But I don't know. It's just one of those things that I sit there and look at it. It's like, at the end of the day, like, I don't have the time to do it when they're playing games. And like you say, if I really wanted to catch up on what's been going on, I haven't watched any highlights either. I'm going to be completely honest. Like, I've barely touched any of the Elite League stuff because I've just had so much else going on and so much other work to do that's kind of like, I need to take priority with that. Like, I work in hockey. Yeah, it's not like the traditional way that you work in hockey, but my work is completely revolved around the sport of hockey. Like, I'm completely engrossed in it all the time. So taking kind of an hour or so to kind of disconnect yourself from it and go, you know what, I'm going to go play video games for an hour, or I'm going to go eat some food, or I'm going to go do something else. Like, that's what I do in my spare time as opposed to watch all the hockey games that I can.
That's exactly the same to me in my line of work. So for anybody who doesn't know, as my day job 9 to 5 in the week, I write for a model railway magazine. And because I've been doing that 40 hours in the week, when I have my spare time, I don't then want to be going and doing more of it, working on my own layout, which means that nothing's happening with it.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I should be supporting the league and British ice hockey, but then like, in a different sense to you, I kind of feel like I am doing that by providing the Lions coverage for those tournaments with the British juniors. So I don't feel the guilt so much. I've just not, when I've got time, again, like I say, I'm cooking, then I'm eating. So what am I going to do? Just kind of keep glancing at it for the first hour and a half on my laptop and not really taking it in.
Yeah.
So it just kind of doesn't, I've not been actively avoiding it, but I've just always had other stuff that's come up.
That's literally the way it's been. But to be fair, you could also make the argument that kind of us talking about it on the podcast is supporting British hockey as well. So, you know, obviously in our own little way, but it is an argument you can make. But those are the standings for the Elite League.
Yes.
I mean, we could sit here and talk about it for ages, but I've seen how much time has passed. You know, we always end up having a bit of a bigger conversation about the Elite League.
We do.
You know, it's a league that we keep an eye on. The one thing I will say is the Elite League social media presence has been a lot better this year, and they need to keep that kind of stuff up next season. Like the fan engagement and kind of getting people involved, that's so important, and something that I think has been lacking a little bit over the last few years. I would imagine the last couple of years have kind of got the infrastructure in place. This is a great tournament to kind of showcase it, and then it's got to keep that level moving forwards, I think. But we're pretty much at the end of the podcast. Chris, you said you wanted to talk about the Lions game, so take it away.
Yes, so it has been announced that the Nottingham Lions are taking part, or in fact the tournament's already started, in a new Three Rivers Cup, they're calling it, deemed because of named after the rivers that the team sit on.
I see.
So there's the Nottingham Lions on the Trent, there's the Sheffield Scimitars on the River Don, and the Widnes Wild on the River Mersey. It's the Three Rivers Cup. We've had our first round of fixtures, which were played over the weekend that's just gone, and the Nottingham Lions are top of the league.
Yes!
A brilliant, it has to be said, 6-2 victory over the Widnes Wild on Saturday, of which I caught all of 3.5 minutes of it because I was playing golf and got in with 3.5 minutes to go, and I managed to catch the last 2 goals by watching those 3.5 minutes.
God, can't even really support the team that he commentates, folks. God, disgraceful.
Really strong performance from the Lions. And what I'm finding interesting is that because now the Elite Series is kicked off, some of the teams haven't managed to retain the players that we have. Yes, okay, we lost Joe Hazelden, but we picked up a couple of National League players because they are not doing the longer season that they first thought they might do. So our team is roughly the same. We had a really strong showing on Saturday, and we are playing this Saturday. It's a late one. It's a 7:45 face-off this Saturday against the Sheffield Scimitars. I'm on my own for commentary for the majority of this tournament because Jono's got other work going on. But yeah, hopefully the Lions, technically, because we won the last game of last series, Lions have won back-to-back games.
No way.
They've won back-to-back games for the first time since I've been covering them, which has been 3 years now. Wow. 3.5 years. It was the first time we've won back-to-back games. But and I remember I was chatting to Anthony Russell, one of my friends on social media, and I said, that was a convincing win. And it was like a 3-2 win on Sunday for Sheffield Everwinners. And I thought, we've got a chance at this tournament here. And he goes, it's the hope that kills you.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I know.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
the hope now that kills you, because you go into games feeling like you can win these games. But yeah, Saturday, 7:45 p.m. live and free on YouTube, as it was in the last tournament and indeed the season before that. Myself on commentary. It'd be great if you could join us on there. The link will be on the Nottingham Lions @ _the Lions Pride social media. And hopefully, with nothing much better to do on a Saturday evening, I can get lots of people interacting with me.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see the numbers now that the Elite League season's up, to see kind of if there's a big difference in the kind of interest from the teams.
I don't know what the the figures on the Elite League series is.
Yeah, they never disclose them. They never will.
No. But I don't, and I'll just have a look at what game is on at the same time.
Yeah,
because
it's a good idea.
Like they will just be between the two of us. Let me just have a look. Elite League. I mean, there will be an game on.
Yeah.
I just don't know who it is.
Oh, maybe it's Panthers Steelers again, Chris, and we can watch the Panthers play really well.
What is the date on Saturday? The 17th, isn't it? It's Coventry against Nottingham, starting at 7:00.
Okay.
So that one will finish. So at least like 10 o'clock will be the only game of hockey on. So.
And to be fair, it being free is a big draw in for for a lot of people as well.
Yep.
And it's always good fun. I do like tuning into the Lions live streams. I'll be sitting there editing and stick it on my phone and see how Chris is doing, just to make sure that he's keeping up that same quality that he does on this podcast, folks. But all I got to say, guys, all it took was a global pandemic for the Nottingham Lions to be a winning team again. That's the last note I needed to add. There you go, Nottingham Lions. So, see, the pandemic did have one good note. And on that lovely note, I think it's time to end today's episode of the EuroPuck podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, whether it's on the video version on YouTube or the audio version, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really do hope that you enjoyed the show. If you want to keep updated on all things EuroPuck or send us your thoughts, opinions, or questions, either from today's show or for our next show next week, then you can follow us on Twitter at EuroPuck Podcast down there, or at EuroPuck Podcast on Instagram as well. We're on both. Send us. Yeah, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed listening to either or both of your hosts today, which we really hope you did, because, we're just two cheeky chappies from England, innit? Then you can follow myself on Twitter at OddmanRushYT or Chris at Chris_Gadsby. Thanks again for watching or listening, guys, and we'll see you again next time. Have a good one, folks.